I'm Corey Rosenbush, President and CEO of the Fertilizer Institute. Welcome to the InfoAg Learning Exchange webinar series, and we thank you for joining us today. As we seek to advance modern agriculture through data-driven solutions, the InfoAg content lineup has expanded to include a wider reach of tools, technologies, products, and practices that you can use to help serve your customers. This includes a broader perspective of solutions to support the 4R. Hello, I'm Corey Rosenbush, President and CEO of the Fertilizer Institute. Welcome to the InfoAg Learning Exchange webinar series, and we thank you for joining us today. As we seek to advance modern agriculture through data-driven solutions, the InfoAg content lineup has expanded to include a wider reach of tools, technologies, products, and practices that you can use to help serve your customers. This includes a broader perspective of solutions to support the 4R nutrient stewardship framework, using the right source of nutrients at the right rate, at the right time, and in the right place. As the industry advances with new technologies and practices, the Fertilizer Institute is proud to be a resource for you. If you like what you hear today, please consider joining us for a virtual InfoAg conference on December 15th through the 17th. A full schedule and registration is now available at infoag.org. Before we get started with today's presentation, I'd like to thank today's InfoAg Learning Exchange premier sponsor, the Mosaic Company. Along with our series sponsors, InfoAg wouldn't be possible without their generous support. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to today's moderator.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks for the opportunity on behalf of the Mosaic Company to sponsor today's webinar. And today's session we're very excited about. This features a presentation from Dr. Tony Vine, Henry A. Wallace, Chair in Crop Sciences at Purdue University. So once we finish with the webinar, we'll follow with some Q&A with Tony, and then Tom Fry from our organization will share some exciting new information about a new product that we just released, Sistera. And in case you missed it, today's presentation is Optimum strip till placement, soil nutrient and crop considerations. So with that, we'll jump right in and we'll see what Tony has to share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to visit with all of you about optimum strip till placement, soil, nutrient, and crop considerations. The assumption in this presentation is that RTK guidance will be available to the farmers that employ the opportunity to place their strip till bands in other positions than what they used the previous time they were in that same field. The ultimate question is, where should the strips be placed in the following years if farmers are applying nutrients with their strip tillage operation? The considerations that we'll review today are soil considerations, nutrient considerations, and crop considerations. And so I'll come back to each of these in more detail and then provide some perspectives based on the research that I've conducted over the years, as well as my experiences in working with farmers and crop consultants who are engaged with strip tillage operations. It is a difficult question to address, and so I will admit right off the bat that I'm skating on thin ice. Some of what you're going to hear today is more speculation or a hypothesis than it is a true verified scientific fact. If you want to have more information about nutrient placement consequences for corn especially, but also to some extent for soybean performance, there are other venues that I would encourage you to consult, including talks that I've given at the CCA conference last December, at the National Strip Tillage Conference in August, and at the American Society of Agronomy webinar in April. There are opportunities to access these talks, but for a fee. And I really want to remind you that I'm not tooting something for personal reward, because the economics of this is absolute zero for me. There are no royalties with this promotion. However, it's interesting in working with the Strip-Till Farmer magazine that they have conducted an annual survey of strip-till producers for the last 7 years. Their 2019 results find that farmers are applying phosphorus and potassium with strips, either fall or spring, about 85% of the time in those that responded to the survey from across North America. Farmers are applying nitrogen with their strips about 28% of the time in the fall and 47% of the time in the spring. And that, of course, means that there are some farmers who do not apply their nitrogen with their strip tillage operation. Farmers apply fertilizer to a depth of 3 to 4 inches, perhaps 30% in that group, 48% at the 5 to 6 inch depth, 7 to 8 inches represents about 16% of the farmers. Most farmers use a dry fertilizer box, which means that they're applying dry preferentially to liquid, and about 38% of the farmers use a strip till rig when they make that application. I've had the opportunity, both at Purdue and at the University of Guelph, to work with strip tillage and nutrient placement research. At Purdue, I've had that opportunity since 2000, but I must say that this road of research has been a very intermittent road because it depends on funding available, student interest, and the opportunity. Most often when we've done strip tillage research, we have done so with the concept of going back using RTK in the same zone the next time we plant that same crop, or the next time we use that same fertilizer regimen in order to evaluate its effectiveness. So when it comes to soil considerations, the first factor is really the residue level. And obviously, if you are following a grain corn harvest, it is impossible almost to center the strip till berm on the prior year's row, especially in a fall strip tillage operation, and especially in situations where you've got high levels of residue with high corn yields. To go beside the previous year's corn row and to offset the strip and let's say 8 inches or 15 inches, the decision as to how close you can go to a previous grain corn harvest stubble is in part determined by what row cleaning devices are on the strip tillage machine itself. There is another factor, and that is what is the level of wheel track compaction. At one time, I thought that the best strip tillage operations would be those that were always in the same zone in order to have the wheel track compaction stay in the same zone. And so this whole concern then for controlled guidance farming, I felt would allow an opportunity to have designated traffic zones. But increasingly, there's been questions about this. And in part, it's because of the loosening benefits of freeze-thaw cycles and wetting and drying cycles. In part, it's because of the fact that many of our implements have very wide wheels that go more than 30 inches wide when we apply a high axle load. And so now the question is, how much loosening do we actually achieve with a strip tillage operation? What devices are we using? A deep shank, a fairly shallow mole knife, or a fairly shallow coulter? All of those affect the degree of soil loosening that's achieved, and may have some impact and allow perhaps with deeper operations more flexibility to move the strip till band away from where it was applied the previous year or 2 years ago and not have any negative consequence. Fertility stratification I'm going to come back to. Vertical and horizontal stratification are both much in evidence, and they are reasons to consider moving the strip to a parallel but offset position the next time you go to that field. And then finally, the soil test levels for phosphorus and potassium are more of an issue with low soil test levels. So as you have lower soil test levels, there's more of an impetus to push the strip position to offset it from where it was the previous year you grew, let's say, the same crop. And here I'm referring mostly to corn, but that there's another factor, and that is low pH levels that I'm going to come back to in a moment. In terms of other nutrient considerations, there is, of course, the relative nutrient mobility. With nitrogen, there is really no particular loss with having it applied in the same position that, for instance, you applied nitrogen for in the corn year which preceded this upcoming strip tillage operation that you're doing, let's say, for next year's corn, because it is so mobile. That's not true with the nutrient like phosphorus, which is quite tightly held. And so if we have a decision to make about the relative position of a strip, it depends to a great extent on what nutrient are we beginning with. The low pH issues, though, are something that we need to be concerned about at high nitrogen application levels in corn production, and I'll come back to that. The other nutrient consideration factor when it comes to determining the position of the strip is actually the rate and the placement. Is banding with strip tillage the only application for that nutrient? Is the same nutrient being broadcast applied at other times? And what type of opening device is actually being used? The timing of nutrient banding is another factor in the decision as to where to place the strip. The closer the application is to planting, I here speculate that the more benefit there is to offset applications to the position of those in prior bands that were applied with that same nutrient. And then, of course, there's an aspect of how do you manage your P and K fertilizers, and is the approach really one of an annual or a biennial fertilizer application program when, for instance, you're applying a maintenance crop removal substitute, basically, in your phosphorus and potassium applications. And here, again, I'm speculating by saying that there's probably more benefit associated with offsetting the fertilizer band in a biennial application program than there is in an annual application program. I want to address this pH issue because I've mentioned it a few times now. And so Dorivar Diaz at Kansas State University has documented the soil pH changes in 2-inch depth increments that have occurred after doing continuous strip till in the same position for 10 years in succession. So this is a situation where the strip was not moved. It was kept in the same position. And in this situation, this is where urea ammonium nitrate was applied in the strip each time, obviously at a depth of about 4 inches. And so here you have a situation where 10 years of UAN application for corn planted in the same row position has resulted in a unacceptably low pH right in that position. Whereas if you move 9 or 10 inches or 12 inches, let's say, away from that position, the pH, although still low, is more satisfactory for corn, early corn development. Another example of this, but for a different nitrogen application system, in this case, anhydrous ammonia applied in the sidedress form, and now the lowest pH is perhaps about 10 inches away from the row position. So once again, the corn row position was in the same position, except now we're applying sidedress anhydrous ammonia, and the story is essentially one in which there is less of a factor in terms of right immediately below the row, but still, I don't recommend necessarily that we deal with a pH problem with strip till application, let's say, of lime or pelletized lime necessarily. But what I do want to say is that if we want to have a uniform pH situation below our crops, then we certainly need to be thinking about where is the nitrogen application going, both in depth and in its horizontal positioning. Other crop considerations are basically crop species and crop row widths. And the speculation here that I would have is if the prior crop is soybeans and cereal grains, and the benefit from an offset is less predictable than it is following a crop like corn. There is also a root proliferation unknown that's partially under genetic control, but here I will suggest that if there are shallow roots, whether those shallow roots come about because of drought or because of compacted soil conditions, then those are the types of situations where there is to be expected a greater benefit from offsetting the band rather than coming right on top of where that nutrient band was applied the previous time you strip tilled in that field. Nutrient removal is also another potential factor, and here essentially my hypothesis is that higher rates of nutrient removal would tend to favor soil conditions with a more uniform soil fertility in the root profile, and hence once again more benefit from offsetting the band rather than confining yourself to trying to match perfectly where that nutrient was applied the previous time, for instance, you grew corn in that field. And a fourth consideration that I added in my preparation for this talk is essentially the equipment considerations. And it makes a great deal of difference what depth the fertilizer is placed to with the tool that you're using, but also the degree of soil fertilizer mixing. And so here you have a situation where a Coulter driven machine is used to deliver dry fertilizer in strips. The depth is possible to get down to 4 to 6 inches, but the actual zone of soil that is loosened at that time is quite small here, and the dry fertilizer is put into quite a narrow zone. Here is another situation where the fertilizer is essentially blown just behind wavy coulters, and it's mixed into the zone, not applied any deeper certainly, but it is perhaps achieving a broader distribution close to the soil surface. So the engaging tool that's used to deliver the fertilizer has a lot to do with where that fertilizer ends up. So here's a pictorial put together by Lauren Schwark, a graduate student in my program. So we've got essentially 2 situations for year 1, Coulter type machine, and this box here kind of shows perhaps most of the enrichment for P and K is happening in the top 3 inches, and perhaps that could be 6 to 10 inches wide. Here's a shank kind of alternative, and in this particular case, we might have gone quite deep, and that fertilizer may have gone down to as deep as 8 inches if the shank has been running at 9 inches. So now when you come back to year 2, and you're coming back to corn, let's say you've had a year of corn, a year of soybeans, you come back, and now you have the decision, do I go for that old row of corn again? Because in the meantime, this nutrient would have distributed somewhat, depending on its mobility, phosphorus being less mobile than potassium, and or do I shift to a new zone and shift in an offset way, perhaps 8 inches away, perhaps 15 inches away. And so in both situations here, I guess the point I want to make is that although there is some spread that's associated with the with time, as well as with the gain in nutrients, particularly potassium, that have come about because of leaching of the 70% or so of potassium that stays in the plant after the grain is removed. Although that happens, I would argue that perhaps there is a benefit to having an offset, simply to have multiple zones of enriched soil available in the rooting profile. For most of my career, when I've attempted to look at strip tillage, I've by and large gone back to the same position. But in a recent study, we've intentionally offset. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that study because it represents perhaps one of the very few bits of information that I'm aware of that deals with that particular topic. It came about because of a spire placement study. That's a potash product resulting from mosaic, which also has a small amount of boron. And it came about in a corn-soybean rotation where the corn was planted in year 1 and then had a rotation crop of soybean, and then in year 2 in the same field, we went back in with an offset program. The same thing was true for another separate field, started year 1 in 2017, came back with corn again in 2019. And we had 4 tillage treatments, 2 or 3 rates of Aspire, and the tillage systems we're going to concentrate on today are fall strip till and spring strip till, because that's essentially our topic. So in this particular case, both strip tills, we intentionally offset the nutrient application when we came back with that second year of corn following the intermediate year of soybeans. In terms of the response in yield with the fall soil warrior system, it was about a 10 bushel response. In year 1, in year 2, there was about a 28 bushel response to the 200 pound rate of this Aspire product. And this happens to be the graduate student that is working on this and is currently writing her thesis. But what I wanted to essentially talk a little bit about is what happened as a result of the offset when it came to the soil fertilizer distribution. What happened to exchangeable K when we intentionally offset? So here's corn year 1. And between rows is BR, in rows is IR, and this represents a rate of K2O, 0 versus 116 pounds coming about from the 200 pounds of Aspire product that was applied. This represents the potassium levels at 0 to 2 inches and 4 to 8 inches. And you notice, of course, just that when we apply this product, we get just a huge increase in stratification of the 0 to 2 versus the 4 to 8 inch depth. The average, we also sampled at the 2 to 4 inch depth, and these are the average soil test Ks in this particular scenario. Here's corn year 2, and this is 2018 results now. And these are, again, the average soil test for the 8 inch depth. The point that I especially want to make from this is this, what's going on with the between row soil analysis. The between row soil analysis is an interesting one because in year 2 now, we get less difference between the 4 to 8 and the 0 to 2 inch. So in other words, there's more overlap. The increase from here to here is perhaps something in the neighborhood of 75 parts per million, but that's a lot lower than the 150 parts per million increase that we noticed between those two depth levels in year 1. So the point of this is essentially when you do an offset, there is less difference in nutrient concentrations in the between row versus the in row position because you've intentionally shifted over. These are the results with spring strip till. Again, it's exactly the same story. Basically, in the between row with the potash application, quite a large difference here, going from about, let's say, 120 to 240 at the top 2 inches, and here again a lower difference of perhaps 70 parts per million with the mean between these two depths of sampling. So the between row benefits in essence from having an offset program when it comes to the positioning of that nutrient application. So I'm going to start this by saying these are speculations, as well as some of them are intertwined with some conclusions. And the first speculation, because there is so little data on this topic, is that compaction risks, I think, can be dealt with in terms of deeper loosening strip till systems, as well as using strip till when the soil conditions are fit. The benefits from offsetting the bands in succeeding years include more uniform soil profile distribution of non-mobile nutrients, more uniform soil pH, especially if most of the nitrogen is applied in strips. This wouldn't be a factor if the nitrogen fertilizer were broadcast. There is another benefit from offsetting bands in terms of more uniform nutrient availability to other rotation crops, for instance, narrow row soybeans. And the fourth benefit from offsetting the bands is less complications when it comes to deciding the probe position that would best represent the soil fertility situation when you're sampling. At the moment, if we are only fertilizing the same zone every time we use RTK, then there's a question, well, how many probes do we take right in that zone versus between the zones that were applied? And some would suggest 25% of the time in the row, but the truth is nobody really knows. And so the ideal positioning of strip till bands will change with soil, will change with the fertility, will change with the crop management, as well as the available equipment. And all of this, of course, can change with respect to me being less of a concern if there's in-season nutrient application, being perhaps more of a concern where there's also a spatial variability factor, less of a need to offset if you have irrigation, and there is other seasonal stresses. I want to acknowledge the funding from Indiana Corn Marketing Council, as well as Mosaic in this research, the seed supplies that came from Pioneer, and the graduate students who made many of the measurements that made this research possible, including Lauren Schwartz, shown here. Thank you very much.
Hey, Tony, Kurt's working on some technical difficulties, it looks like, so I'm going to go ahead and get the Q&A rolling so we don't run out of time here. And when Kurt is available, we'll let him take the lead. So first question we've got here is, when it comes to soil sampling fields that are strip tilled, what is the best practice? Cores only pulled from the strip or equal amounts of in and out of the strip?
I mentioned in my presentation that this is a difficult question to answer, and it is one in which the jury is still out in terms of the precise proportions, in part because of the fact that it depends on whether the strip tilled application is just a one-time application, in which case we generally recommend 75% plus of the cores should come from away from the strip. But if you have been managing your strip till program in such a way that you're always on the same strip, then you need to factor that in with more samples from the in-row position. And there is, of course, a little bit of an issue also associated with whether the strip till is the primary way in which phosphorus and potassium is banded, or whether the strip till is only used for, let's say, nitrogen banding. So if you're using your strip till with a spring pre-plant anhydrous ammonium, and you're only using nitrogen, well, then that really has no influence on where the bands, where the probes should be actually taken. And but in terms of the exact proportion, it matters more in that situation where the strip is always in the same zone. And one of the benefits I see of offsetting the strip with P&K applications is basically moving us away from precisely answering this question, which is going to vary with soil type and soil test level, and allowing us to maintain a more balanced multi-position probing program for getting our soil analysis questions answered.
Well, I'm glad I don't have to figure out those soil samples, but we do have Kurt back, so I am going to pop back off into the background and let you guys continue.
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, sorry for the technical difficulty there, group. And Dr. Vine, thank you. Excellent information when we think about for our stewardship. You touch on all aspects of that. So yeah, as Sally mentioned, I think you kind of covered the bases on the soil sampling piece. Let me look here. So based on your experience, do you feel that strips should continually be shifted even more than 15 inches? Maybe possibly shifting 7.5 inches each year, assuming a 30-inch row?
If I had my druthers and I were strip tilling annually, then I would prefer to go in increments. If you're assuming you're beginning with a 30-inch row system, I would say that the ideal scenario would be one in which you're removing 7.5 inches every year. However, if you were in a, let's say, a corn soybean rotation and you're only using strip tillage before corn, and perhaps you're using no-till on the soybeans, and oh, by the way, maybe we're planting soybeans in 15-inch rows, then I am probably more okay with a biennial program like that to do strip tillage 15 inches away, at least the initial time after the first strip till operation. And again, that's assuming that you're talking about a biennial P&K management program. So I've kind of answered your question both ways. Annual, I would prefer 7.5. Biennial, perhaps I would begin at 15-inch. And then it would also say that it depends a little bit on the extent to which the band is dispersed when you're actually blowing it in that particular zone. The more aggressive the strip tillage system is and the more solid the mixing is, the lower the requirement there is to try to do the 7.5-inch increment. The more fixed the location, the end location of that fertility band is, the more benefit there is from a 7.5-inch. So once again, I sort of talked about the nuances here, and they're very important in getting this system right, and that's especially true at lower test P&K. At higher test P&K levels, the distance of the displacement, whether it's 5 inches or 10 inches or 15 inches, matters a lot less.
Excellent. Wow. That reminds me a lot, Dr. Vine, that first day of agronomy class, my professor said, you know, to be a good agronomist, you have to say it depends. So a lot of details there. So that was a great detail for us. So I appreciate that. Yeah, moving on to the next question. I know that you spoke to compaction just a little bit during your speculation and conclusion, but the question came at the beginning of the presentation. You mentioned compaction considerations. Where have you seen the biggest impact of compaction in strip till?
The compaction that comes from strip till has been of greatest concern for me in spring strip tillage systems immediately before planting operations. where the push is on sometimes in order to try to achieve faster drying of soil and an earlier warming. And so if there's compromises made in terms of the timing of the strip tillage operation, and when we are using fertilizer carts with high load capacities and the soil conditions are marginal, that's when I get the most concerned about compaction. And notice that I said that I'm more concerned about the pre-plant and the at-plant compaction than I am about the previous year's compaction, because we often will have the amelioration benefits of freeze-thaw and wetting and drying cycles that ameliorate some of that. And then we also have the opportunity in moderately dry soil conditions to have loosening achieved with our strip tillage in the row zone. That loosening benefit that we picked up in the low zone as a benefit from the strip tillage operation can be lost if it is associated with the operation of high wheel track zones, let's say in using duals on tractors and using high axle loads on the fertilizer applicators that we pull behind our strip tillage units. So yes, theoretically, we should always avoid compaction as much as we can. And we will pick up more benefits from the nutrients applied if we don't have that compaction. But there are choices to be made. In the interest of field efficiencies, we've gone wider. And although we've enhanced our soil, our drainage situations to improve the uniformity of moisture and the speed of drying in the spring, there are risks involved with spring strip tillage, and it's for that reason that we should try to maintain shallow operations as long as we are not putting on too high a rate of potassium and nitrogen that could be toxic to the early corn seedling growth.
Excellent. Again, appreciate the detail. I think that was a great call out when we think about strip till in northern climates versus southern climates. And as you mentioned, some of the freeze thaw cycles and considerations we need to make there from northern latitudes versus southern latitudes. Dr. Vine, what would you say is the biggest gap or gaps in research around the implementation of strip tillage?
They are numerous, and they reflect the fact that that people like myself have not done nearly enough research to answer the myriad.
Oh, looks like we may have lost Dr. Vine here temporarily. See if we can get him back online here. Apologize for some of the hiccups here today.
Overall rates in P and K. And the fourth question is essentially one of, is it of more benefit to deliver micronutrients and sulfur in the band, or is the application of these other nutrients other than N, P, and K more beneficial in a foliar or in a broadcast application mode? So, and then all of those are affected by the degree of the stratification that occurs and the influence of low versus high testing soils. And so we haven't gone nearly far enough in answering those questions. So I must say in this context, if I'm still speaking without Kurt's next question, I must say in this context that I am not happy with the amount of research that I've been able to do to answer farmer questions in this regard. And I view it as being a very, very important endeavor for our future to be able to answer those questions from both a production standpoint as well as from an environmental standpoint, to preserve the nutrients that we need for and to keep them for the crop itself and not to be lost to the environment, especially when it comes, of course, to phosphorus and nitrogen. But there are opportunities to investigate and to do that for corn as well as for soybeans. Hopefully, Kurt's coming back on. And if not,
Dr. Vine, hopefully you can hear me now?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Dr. Vine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Sorry about that once again. Hey, thank you so much. Again, that was great information. Want to thank the Mosaic Company on behalf of the Mosaic Company again. Really appreciate the opportunity to sponsor and really enjoyed the presentation. I hope that everyone else did. Took some nuggets of information away. Looking forward to some of your future research and really appreciate you sharing that information back to us, to the industry here. So now with that said, we actually have something pretty exciting. We have a new product that we've just launched from the Mosaic Company called Sistera. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tom Fry, and we're going to take a couple of minutes to learn more about that. And then we'll be able to have some Q&A and the QR code at the very end. So with that.
Thank you, Kurt. I'm pleased to join everybody here today at the tail end of the InfoAg seminar and provide an update on an important innovation from the Mosaic Company. We have just launched a brand new product called Sistera. And Sistera is innovative in multiple ways. It is a phosphate-based technology that brings additional things than just advanced crop nutrition to the table. And I'm going to take a few moments here to introduce it to you. The Sistera story really began with a need, like most new products do. And the need is that increasingly we're hearing from growers and retailers that they're looking to go beyond just utilizing the most effective technologies for crop nutrition and are looking for ways to bring inputs and management techniques into their farming operations that allow them to focus on soil health in ways that maybe we haven't done in the past. And that's where the Mosaic Company, in partnership with Anuvia, have introduced a brand new technology called Sistera. And it's based on our belief that we can use recycled organic matter to promote soil health and performance and do more for a legacy of both profitability today and for future generations. So introducing Sistera, it's a brand that we're just beginning to introduce and are launching this fall. And it's exciting because it allows us to feel like sustainable isn't attainable. It is a brand new technology that incorporates the recycled organic matter to promote both greater yields and long-term soil health. The product is new in the way that it's made. It takes recycled organic matter in combination with a proprietary process and results in an analysis of 14 pounds of N, 24 pounds of P2O5, 10 pounds of sulfur, and up to 15 pounds of organic matter. This combination has several key benefits. One, the organic matter boosts and balances the soil microbiome in ways that other fertilizer sources can't. The nutrients work together to provide improved nutrient efficiency with a unique way that the nitrogen is formed within the granule such that we have both fast release and slow release. And because of the raw materials that are used, it is more sustainable than other fertilizers. The exciting thing is we wind up with a high quality granule that's easy to use and handle ways other products that you come to expect from the Mosaic Company, like Micro Essentials, MAP and DAP, Aspire, and KMEG. So let's dig a little deeper, because this is a product that is not only feature rich in that it provides benefits to both retailers and farmers, but it goes beyond that in thinking about what are the items, the things that are important to consumers as well. The features of recycled organic matter boosting and balancing the soil is really tied to what agriculture has been focused on from the very beginning, which is how do we protect and maintain the resources of our farms? The aspect of this unique granule improving nutrient efficiency is really tied to our efforts around 4R nutrient stewardship and improving balanced crop nutrition. And this last aspect of being able to recycle organic matter and nutrients that would not have been sustainably utilized is a strong way that we can focus on environmental stewardship. All of these contribute to what's absolutely critical for today, which is higher yields, but allows us to think about improving the legacy of the land over time. So how is Sistera unique? The organic matter that's contained within these granules works to stimulate the microbiome immediately around in the rhizosphere in contact with the roots and with the fertilizer granule. We've proven that this creates a healthier microbiome, allowing an interaction between the fertilizer, the plant system, and the microorganisms, resulting in higher yields and productivity and greater nutrient efficiency. However, it creates questions in people's mind whenever we talk about organic matter, and is the use of Sistera, how does that influence the organic matter on my fields? The analogy I'd like to use is similar to the way that we've positioned microessentials over the years. Sistera boosts and balances the microbiome by an interaction with the organic matter right around the granule and does not significantly increase the overall organic matter content of the field, not unlike the way that the elemental sulfur reduces the pH in around the granule of microessentials, resulting in a slight acidity that keeps the phosphates in a more plant available form longer, while not changing overall the soil pH of a field. The benefits of stimulating microorganisms via organic matter with the fertilizer granule is the key to what makes Sistera unique and why it contributes to healthy soils and improved nutrient uptake. We've got exciting data to share, and we've got a number of trials underway this year that will be providing more information. But like our history of all products, there's really a science-based focus on improving crop nutrition, and the performance of Sistera follows in line with what we have seen with microessentials, where improved technology allows us to do more than we've been able to do with commodity fertilizers and ammonium sulfate. And we'll be sharing more on about the performance of these products as we get to the tail end of this year and are able to assemble our data from the summer of 2020. A key to understand is that Sistera, because it is a lower phosphate analysis fertilizer, is going to perform best from an economic and a return on investment when combined with another source. And it's just natural that the Mosaic company is introducing Sistera in combination with microessentials. We'll be able to be quite flexible in terms of the rates that are used, but an example of a 50-50 blend at 200 pounds would provide an analysis of 26, 64, 0, 20S plus 15 pounds of organic matter if we combine Sistera with microessentials S10. In doing so, we combine the two most innovative phosphate technologies available with two forms of sulfur for season-long availability, both fast and slow release nitrogen, and sustainably support the goals for current and future generations. Both of these products are produced in the United States and contribute to the US economy. For more information, there's a website, www.sisterafertilizer.com, which will actually take you within cropnutrition.com, or you can go directly to cropnutrition.com and click on the product's webpage. And there you can learn more about Sistera, its features and benefits, and yield information as more data becomes available this fall. What's important to know about Sistera is it's a way that we can build a wider community of support for agriculture and advanced crop nutrition. In the future, we'll be talking more about how the manufacturing of this product reduces greenhouse gas emission and the carbon credits, as well as how it can support agri-food initiatives that are tied to improving and reducing overall carbon footprints of agriculture. Sistera plus Microessentials truly can deliver more value, and we're excited to bring this new innovation. With that, Kurt, let's open it up for some questions.
Hi everyone. This is Jenny with the Fertilizer Institute. I will jump on while we're waiting. We have one question, and that is, what's the source of the recycled organic matter, and how is quality control maintained?
So, great question. And this is a unique product that's in partnership with Inuvia, and they've spent roughly 20 years mastering this technology. It is going to be a flexible source but fairly consistent. Everything from, they have a partnership with Smithfield Foods that they'll be using dried manure from swine, from recycled food waste from Tampa Bay area, and possibly a partnership with other communities, to also looking at recycled organic matter from wastewater treatment facilities. And what's unique about this process is it's different than the way that organic matter has been processed in the past. It is broken down, and really there's only its constituent parts remain through the processing and the techniques, such that they wind up with a very consistent raw material that goes into the granulation process and allows us to provide a consistent aspect in the way that it works within stimulating the soil microbiome.
Okay, the next question, and I think you may have addressed this in your presentation, but does the organic matter have micronutrients?
There are some nutrients that are come along as part of that recycled. Right now, we are not going to be claiming on the analysis any specific micronutrients. I think everybody's aware that organic matter in the soil is an important reservoir of micronutrients. I think our focus is to make sure that we are consistent in our labeling. I think those that understand the fertilizer business, you have to absolutely always maintain the same profile for what you register nationally and at the state level. So at the present time, it is not our intent to include micronutrients in the analysis nor in the product. But as time goes along, it could be that we identify synergistic relationships, that there are opportunities to do things from everything from inclusion in the manufacturing process or potential coatings on the outside of the granule.
All right. Kurt, I'm going to turn it over to you if you have any final comments that you wanted to address before we move on to the QR code.
There's one more question that I see popping up on the thing. Tony asks, is the particle density of Sistera and Aspire the same? Answer is no, that the bulk density of a MAP product versus a phosphate product are a little bit different. Will it blend effectively, and is the SGN UI similar? Absolutely, it'll work extremely well as a blend partner with both potash products and other phosphate products. And based on our evaluation, I believe it's going to be very close in terms of bulk density between MAP-DAP, Microessentials, and Sistera, meaning that those products can work in combination.
Perfect. So much, Tom. And
Thanks again for joining us today and for our sponsors' support. Please visit infoag.org for more information about our webinar series lineup and to register for InfoAg Live in December.